We had Lake Speed Jr. in studio, a certified lubrication specialist from Joe Gibbs Racing's Driven Oil. Now, Lake has motor oil running through his veins, passed down from his father, respected NASCAR driver Lake Speed Sr. We talked about how Driven Oil is formulated, the API index, and how to choose the proper Driven Oil for your vehicle. We broke it down into a three-part series. In this episode, we're going to talk about how Driven Oil is formulated. Hey, so let's talk a little bit about bases of oils. Now, there's basically only 3 or 4 companies that make the base of oil, so everybody thinks that every oil is different. And to be real honest, the bases are exactly the same.
Well, yeah, when it comes to a full synthetic PAO, polyalpha olefin synthetic base oil, there's only 3 companies in the whole world that actually make synthetic base oil.
Right.
And most of them are companies that no one's ever heard of. It's not the brands that do it. They're major global chemical companies behind the scenes that everybody buys from, and then they go to one of 4 companies that actually make the additives, because the core oil is 2 things, about 85% base oil, 15% additives.
Packages,
right. And you got 4 companies that make all the additive packages, and again, none of those companies are consumer brands that anyone knows about. And when it comes down to valve train wear, protection for high performance engines, the additive package is critical, and that's what separates the men from the boys, if you will, when it comes to the different formulations.
Sure.
Yeah, everybody can go buy basically the same base oils, and there is some variation, and you can gain some things by being very selective with your base oils. It's like a good cook, right? A good cook could use the certain ingredients that are available at everybody, but it's how you match your ingredients to your application.
Well,
that's the key.
And the blend as well. I mean, I know that we had to go, the base oil had to be at a specific temperature, and then it would get centrifuged with this, and all those things. That entire process was very important in the blending of the oil as well.
The way I like to tell people is this: understanding oil and how it's made is kind of like understanding the difference between having a homemade Betty Crocker cake mix versus having a chef make a cake for you.
Exactly.
In the end, you have a cake.
Right.
One tastes a whole lot better than the other. Now, one costs more to make, takes longer to do. One's quicker and cheaper.
Sure.
But no one on their wedding day wants the Betty Crocker cake mix.
Right.
You want the high-end piece, and so when you have a track day car, you've got your race car, or you have your classic car. What you're doing, if you go buy a specialty high-performance oil, you're buying that custom-made cake, if you will, that's tuned to your application, that has all the right things for it without anything that doesn't need to be there.
Right.
Let's test it. So we spent years, we spent over $1 million just the first year testing engines to find out what wants. And the biggest thing we found was there's a lot of different lab tests that are very easy to do and cheap, but they don't tell you what the motor wants.
Exactly.
The only way to find out what the engine wants is to put it in the motor and run it.
Well, they have things that are like a 4-ball test, for example, is what everybody it's basically a test where they put a load against basically a ball bearing, and they tell what the shear point is of the oil. That is great if you want to compare your oil, but it doesn't do what you need it to do on Sunday, 500 miles, 10,000 RPM all day.
No, and it doesn't tell you what happens when you expose that to fuel, to partially burnt fuel, or an ethanol blended fuel that's partially burnt.
Right.
Those are the other X factors that you don't see in the lab testing. In fact, our experience with developing these oils was a lot of the stuff that would be best in the lab would fail on the racetrack.
And probably fail miserably. And race cars being as efficient as they are, obviously to get the most amount of horsepower out of an engine, you need the maximum efficiency. So the volumetric efficiency on race engines is over 100% in some areas on naturally aspirated cars. I remember seeing 105, 106% volumetric efficiency in a naturally aspirated motor. That basically means that the engine is inhaling more air than what it's physically capable. A 358 cubic inch engine is inhaling 365 cubic inches of air, and it burns all that fuel. The modern everyday car doesn't do that. What happens when a cylinder? What happens when a spark plug fails or whatever? When it misfires, now that raw fuel is sitting there washing those cylinder walls down. You can't test that with a 4-ball test.
No. There's end of the day, there's no substitute for running an oil in an engine and finding out what does the engine like. And that's basically what we did. Was we built motors. At Joe Gibbs Racing, they built over 300 engines a year. that all race for over 500 miles every weekend.
Right.
Right? So we have the ability to find out, what does the engine want?
Right.
And that's what we did. We just kept on testing different things to find out, what does it want? The fact that we have our own in-house dynos that could do full race simulations made it go faster.
Absolutely.
And that became our process is, hey, we're not the chemistry experts, we never claimed to be, but we do know who the right guys are. We know who the base oil suppliers are. We know who the additive suppliers are. We have those relationships. We let them feed us in the information, feed us in products. We test it and say, this is what the engine likes, this is what it doesn't like. And you can continuous development improvement because no technology stays the same. We're not using the same materials. It's not the same, the valve trains today are nothing like they were 10 years ago.
They're not even close.
So you've had to change the additive package, change the base oils to keep up with the advances in technology.
Right. And that's one of and another thing that Driven has done is you guys have gone to the specific needs of specific vehicles as well.
Yes.
Like you have an oil that is designed for air-cooled engines. You guys have designed an oil specifically for that.
Yeah, and when we learned a lot of doing the race engine oil development, we learned so much.
Sure.
One of the big things in a high-performance motor, especially a NASCAR engine that's turning 9,000 plus RPM all day long, is keeping things cool.
Sure.
Right? So we learned, okay, what oils keep valve springs cool, keep pistons cool. Well, like you said, an air-cooled engine, air-cooled. Actually, most of the cooling is being done by the oil.
Exactly.
Right? So if you have an oil that has better thermal transfer properties, it keeps the engine cooler, and heat is always the enemy of your engine.
Heat is the devil lives in the heat. That's exactly where the devil lives in a race motor.
Exactly. So that's one of the things we took. We applied what we learned from keeping valve springs cool and said, okay, hey, we can help guys with Porsche motors over here and air-cooled motors by giving them the same technology that enables the oil to stay cool, to not break down under the heat. That way you can maintain the protection that you're trying to get from the oil for the life of the oil change.
Right. Well, and the good thing is, if you have an old 57 Chevy, they didn't have hardened valve seats. Mm-hmm. So when lead went away, it's now all the time, you got valve problems and things like that and valve guide problems. With motor oil, it's a little different. We can't go out and buy lead and put it in the gas, but you guys have answered the questions that we have for the old school hot rod guys for the motor oil.
Exactly. With our product line, all the additives you need for that application are already in the bottle. You don't have to go try to play chemist by saying, I'm going to go get this brand of oil, I'm going to go buy this guy's additive, and I'm going to try to mix it together to make something and hope it works. That's kind of like playing Russian roulette with your motor. Whether all those things do what they're supposed to do. And like you said, your experience in the lab, if you don't blend the things in at the right temperature, throwing it in, not going to do anything.
Well, they come apart.
It could be worse.
Yeah, they come apart. Now that you know how Driven oil is formulated, don't forget to watch our other videos with our interview with Lake Speed Jr.